Israel has confirmed that Hamas has released 2 more hostages as the French President Emmanuel Macron arrives in Israel. Well, Macron met the Israeli President Isaac Herzog. He will be meeting the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during this visit also. And he's going to be meeting the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. His trip to Israel aims to express his country's full solidarity with Israel after the deadly attack by Hamas. Earlier, Macron met with the French families that were caught up at the Tel Aviv airport. Onto the hostage release now, and Hamas has released 2 more hostages. 2 elderly Israeli women have been set free, which Hamas says has been done on health grounds. The women are 79 and 85 years old, respectively. Earlier, an American mother and daughter duo was also released by Hamas. As per Israel, there are some 220 hostages that are held captive by the militant group after the attack on October 7th. While there are some unconfirmed reports that mention that the group might be considering the release of more hostages with dual nationalities. Meanwhile, Israel continues to bomb Gaza. As per Israeli official statements, the country could soon carry its expected ground offensive into Gaza. The Israeli military says it's preparing for unrelenting attacks to dismantle Hamas. The Israeli chief of staff says the country has no intention of curbing its strikes on Gaza. Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant, during a tour along the Gaza coastline, also said that Israel is preparing thoroughly for the next step, that is expected to be a multilateral operation from the air, ground and sea. These strong statements come amid reports that there is pressure on Israel by its allies to delay the offensive. Reports indicate that the US has urged Israel to delay the ground operation to allow time for the release of hostages and shipments of aid into Gaza. US President Joe Biden has said that any discussions about a Gaza ceasefire could only take place if Hamas frees all hostages seized from Israel. Biden also spoke to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and reaffirmed his commitment to ongoing efforts to secure the release of all remaining hostages. He also urged the need of continuous flow of aid to Gaza. Meanwhile, as per the White House, the United States has sent a few military advisors to Israel following the October 7th Hamas attacks. And these officers have experience in, quote, the sort of operations that Israel is conducting and may conduct in the future, and were over there to share some perspective. Well, the humanitarian cost of this war also includes the impact on children. And as per the humanitarian organisation Save the Children, at least 2,000 children have been killed in Gaza over the past 17 days. And 27 have been killed in the West Bank. That's according to Israeli media. Amid all this devastation in Gaza, there are visuals of a complete power outage in the Strip, including all hospitals. Meanwhile, Hamas leaders are calling on Arab and Muslim leaders to take a stand amidst the soaring death toll in Gaza. The militant group's political bureau chief says that the West's pro-Israel position has built a wall between Western countries and the Arabs and the Muslim populations that will never go away. The leader further warned that Israel will never be safe until Palestinians can enjoy safety, freedom and sovereignty. On the other hand, Israel says it has killed 5 commanders of a key Hamas military group in the 17 days since the war broke out in the region. The IDF says each of the commanders was a member of the Hamas aerial array, which operates a variety of weapons against the State of Israel, and played a significant role in the October 7th attack. In other updates, the former US President Barack Obama has warned that some of Israel's actions in Gaza may backfire. Obama says that some of these actions are like cutting off food and water, could harden Palestinian attitudes for generations. And it could also weaken international support for Israel.
We should expect that regardless of ego, ambition.
Well, for more on this, our correspondent Jodie Cohen sent us this report from Ground Zero in Tel Aviv.
French President Emmanuel Macron has landed in Israel for meetings with Israeli President Herzog. Prime Minister Netanyahu was the opposition party head Benny Gantz, who's now, remember, joined the emergency unity government. and Yair Lapid, who is the head of the opposition. Now, he says that he's come in full solidarity with Israel, that his first priority is the release of the hostages. Remember, after that massacre on the 7th of October, when 1,400 people were killed by Hamas, and it's thought to be approximately 230 people taken hostage back into Gaza and being held by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. That's what he said is his priority. He's also, it's thought, that he's going to be raising the prospect of a peace process with the Palestinians. Now, this seems a bit early to talk about that now, but the US National Security Council spokesperson, when asked about this, said that the key to eventually getting a two-state solution is normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and the US is still going to be working on that. In the meantime, the Israel Defense Forces chief says the army is ready for an operation in Gaza to dismantle Hamas. I spoke with the IDF spokesperson Richard Hecht on Monday afternoon, and he said that targeting Hamas's leadership, the military wing and infrastructure are the priorities there. Now, the National Security Council spokesperson in the US said that the US has sent a military advisor, or a few military advisors, to Israel. They said that Iran is supporting Hamas and Hezbollah, and that Iran is actively facilitating attacks on US bases in West Asia, and there is concern that this could spread. This is Jodie Cohen for WION World as One.
Well, for more on this story, we now have Professor David Dunn joining us live from Birmingham in England. He's a Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham. Many thanks for your time, Professor Dunn. Obviously, there's been huge support for Israel from its allies, but I'm alluding to what Barack Obama said. Is there a chance now that if this ground offensive takes place and if Israel continues to bomb Gaza, that it could harden these kind of attitudes against Palestine for generations?
Absolutely. So there's two different issues here. One is international responses. And when the massacres took place initially following the Hamas attacks, all sympathy was on Israel's side for the brutality that it suffered. But since then, with the bombings and the death of civilians, and including children in Gaza, sympathy has shifted over the period since the initial attacks. So the world opinion is much more critical of Israel than it was initially. And then the second issue is that if Israel continues this operation and with the ground offensive there are more civilian deaths, then that will likely further radicalize, if it's possible to further radicalize, the Palestinians in the Gaza Strips for generations to come. But not just the Palestinians there, the Palestinians in the West Bank, and indeed opinion in the Arab world more broadly. So there's a really difficult situation facing Israel, and that partly explains why the army hasn't gone in as quickly as we expected, in that they have the dilemma. They want to stop Hamas being a threat and a source of potential violence to Israel. At the same time, they have to balance against that the risk of making more terrorists as a consequence of their military action against Hamas.
Absolutely. And what about the risks of this conflict widening into more of the Middle East? Do you think that has slightly waned the chances of that, or is it still a huge concern that this war could widen and involve other countries?
I think that risk remains. And what America has been doing, both through its diplomacy and by its positioning of two aircraft carrier battle groups in the Eastern Mediterranean, is trying to actually play down or to alleviate, put off, prevent the prospect of that. But there is a real possibility that Hezbollah in Lebanon will attack on Israel's northern border. If that happens, given that they are supplied by Iran, some people in Israel have suggested that they will attack the head of the snake, i.e. Iran, and then you could have an attack from Israel against Iran itself. If that happens, that will close the Straits of Hormuz, put up oil prices, it will prevent liquid and nitrogen gas getting from Qatar to Europe. It will be a massive shock to the international system. Of course, there's also the prospect that America may actually come to Israel's defense in Lebanon. Remember, back in the 1980s, the US Navy fired a whole variety of ordnance into Lebanon in support of Israel. So if that happens, that you have America involved directly in the Middle Eastern war, what Russia does with its Syrian ally is in question. Whether Saudi Arabia remains neutral in the war is also an issue, given the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So if things start to escalate, there's no telling where it ends up.
Let's hope we don't have to be discussing those types of things in the future. Professor David Dunn joining us live from Birmingham, a Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham. Many thanks there, Professor David Dunn.